phones, Babylons can't crack the.
What do YouTube? B Kelly back again with another banger. Today's video, I'm going to be talking about my preseason top 25. This is my top 25 going into the college football season. Now, this is opinion based. This is not the real top 25 released by the NCAA. Now, let me give you a heads up about these rankings. I will have predictions on it if you've seen my past prediction videos for each of these teams I've made. I'm still putting those videos out as we speak for other conferences, but the rest of the conferences I haven't done yet, they're not in the top 25 anyways. But I just wanted to tell you all that. Now let's get to the video. And also, this is not where I think the teams will finish. With my number one spot, I have Clemson. Now, the reason why I have them number one is that they do have some good returning value. I mean, they obviously have one of the best quarterbacks in the nation and a Heisman frontrunner and a guy who seems like he can win the Heisman this upcoming year. And I have them finishing 12-0 on the season, and they have some pretty good notable players, even though they lost one of their best players in Justin Ross, which sucks. The notable players I put down were Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, and Niles Pickney. Coming in at my number two spot, I have the Ohio State. Now, Ohio State is easily one of the best teams in the nation, and I do expect them in the national championship game this year. Hopefully, they do not disappoint. I don't think they will. They're a powerhouse. Now, this Ohio State team is talented. Just to name a few notable players, Justin Fields, a Heisman candidate, and a guy who's a potential number one pick, possibly. Trey Sermon, OU transfer, former OU starting running back, and Chris Olave. Now, I'm predicting a 12-0 record for Ohio State this season. I don't see them losing a game just like Clemson. I just think they're too powerful and too good, even though the Big Ten is tougher than the ACC. Coming in at my number three spot, I have Alabama. I think Alabama will be back in the playoffs this year, unlike last season. Last season was a little bit of a slip-up, they got hurt, but they have a lot of players that could have been drafted pretty high that are returning. Some notable players I have for them is Najee Harris, Devontae Smith, and Dylan Moses. And I'm predicting a 12-0 record if you saw my prediction video. Now, that is what I think they can do, but they could easily go 11-1 and 10-2. I mean, I think LSU and Auburn are some pretty threatening games on their schedule, not to mention Georgia as well. They could go 9-3, I doubt it. I'd see more of a 11-1, 12-0 record in my eyes. Coming in at the number 4 spot, I have Georgia. Now, Georgia, I'm predicting an 11-1 record with a loss to Bama. But they could go 9-3, worst case scenario in my eyes, because Florida, Alabama, and Auburn are some threatening games, but I really see them going 11-1. They could even go undefeated as well, best case scenario. But let's talk about some notable players. They have Devontae Wyatt, George Pickens, and Jamie Newman, and they have a lot of talent returning. I think they're going to be a pretty good team, and I don't know if they'll be in the playoff because I don't have them winning the SEC, but they're definitely a contender for sure. Coming in at my number 5 spot, I have LSU. Now, some people think LSU lost way too much talent. They lost Joe Brady, but honestly, I think LSU's still going to be a very talented squad. I mean, they do have the Blitnikoff winner still in Jamar Chase. Talking about some notable players, Jamar Chase, Miles Brennan, and Christian Fulton, who's an amazing defensive back and is young. And I'm predicting a 10-2 record on the season for them, with losses to Alabama and Auburn. But they could go 12-0, I just don't see it. They could also go 9-3 with a loss to Texas, but I'm going to say 10-2 right now as my prediction. Coming in at my number 6 spot, I have the Oklahoma Sooners and my Big 12 favorite. Now, the Sooners could easily be back in the playoffs as a number 4 seed and maybe even a number 3 seed, but they probably have to be undefeated for that because they're definitely going to have some harder restrictions on them after this past year in the playoff with LSU. In case you lived under a rock, a 63-28 loss. Now, I'm predicting an 11-1 record for the Oklahoma Sooners with a loss to Texas. Now, I really don't see them going below 11-1 in my eyes. I think they're too talented of a squad to do that. I just don't see them losing more than one game. If they don't lose to Texas, they'll lose to some random team, maybe like Iowa State, TCU, K-State even, maybe even Baylor in that rate, if you understand what I'm saying. But some notable players is Spencer Rattler, Kennedy Brooks, and Creed Humphrey. With my number 7 spot, I have Oregon. Now, Oregon is going to go 11-1 in my eyes, more than likely, and that's their best case scenario in my eyes as well. Now, I'm saying 11-1, but they could easily go 9-3 because I do see USC and Arizona State, those two back-to-back games, being some pretty tough games for them. But let's talk about some notable players such as Penei Sewell, Kayvon Thibodeau, Mykel Wright. Now, Oregon is in my number 7 spot, and I do expect them to have a really good season, especially with that defense and some amazing returning players. But my biggest question mark with them is the quarterback spot, since they lost Justin Herbert. Coming in at my number 8 spot, I have Penn State. Now let's talk about some notable players for Penn State. Some notable players I found out were Sean Clifford, Micah Parsons, and Journey Brown. I'm expecting them all to have a really good season, and I'm predicting an 11-1 record for Penn State. Worst case scenario in my eyes is 10-2. Best case, 11-1 is what I'm predicting. Penn State does have a very talented squad as well. Coming in at the number 9 spot, I have the Florida Gators. Now, in some people's eyes, the Florida Gators are a projected college football playoff team, and they're definitely a contender for it as well, according to some people. Now, they could definitely go 12-0 this season. I'm predicting a 10-2 record with a loss to Georgia and LSU, but they could definitely go 12-0. They definitely have the pieces and talent to do it, and especially the coaching. But let's talk about some notable players. Some notable players are Kyle Trask, Kyle Pitts, and Trevon Grimes. To finish off the top 10, I have Auburn at number 10. Some notable players for Auburn are Bo Nix, Christian Tutt, and KJ Britt. Now, I'm predicting a 9-3 record for Auburn, but to finish second in the SEC West. But let's talk about that schedule. Now, they could easily go 12-0, but I don't think that's going to happen. I really see 9-3 being a pretty likely scenario, but they could also go 11-1, 10-2. But I wouldn't be surprised if they do better than 9-3. They definitely have a very talented squad down there at Auburn. Coming in at my 11th spot, I have Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame is a very talented squad and very well coached. I'm predicting an 11-1 record with a loss to Clemson, even though they could lose to Louisville, USC, and Wisconsin. I just don't see them losing all those games. They could go 10-2, but I'm going to stick with 11-1. Some notable players are Ian Book, Kyle Hamilton, and Dalen Hayes. Coming in at my number 12 spot, I have Minnesota. Now, I feel like Minnesota's getting kind of disrespected in some of these top 25s, being in the late teens and early 20s. I think Minnesota's a really good squad. They didn't go 11-2 for no reason last year. I think they have an amazing defense and definitely some good players on the offense as well. Now, I did predict a 12-0 record, but that's the best case scenario. They could definitely do it, especially with some of the pieces they have. But worst case scenario in my eyes is probably a 9-3 record, maybe even 10-2, because the Wisconsin and Michigan game, they're pretty threatening. Not to mention Iowa. They could definitely go 9-3. So don't get swayed by the 12-0 that I have. Some notable players are Tanner Morgan, Rashad Bateman, and Daniel Falele. At my number 13 spot, I have Wisconsin. Now, I'm predicting Wisconsin to go 8-4. Now, even though I'm predicting them to go 8-4, this is only a preseason prediction with their spot they have right now. Now, I do have them losing to Michigan, Notre Dame, Minnesota, and Iowa. Now, will they lose all those games? Probably not. They could definitely go 10-2, but I feel like the loss of Jonathan Taylor is going to be pretty big for that team. I mean, he has pretty much like almost the whole offense. Now let's talk about some notable players. Some notable players are Isaiah Loudermilk, Garrett Rand, and Bryson Williams. Coming in at number 14, I have OSU, the Cowboys. Now, I'm predicting a 9-3 record for OSU. I have them losing to TCU, Texas, and OU. Best case scenario I see is 10-2, even though I don't think they'll do it. I think they're more likely to go 9-3. But yeah, 10-2 is their best case scenario. I still have them losing to OU and Texas. But worst case scenario is probably 8-4. They could do that, but they probably won't. They probably only lose 3 games at the most. And the best they'll do is 10 wins. But some notable players I have for the OSU Cowboys is Spencer Sanders, Chuba Hubbard, and Tylan Wallace. Coming in at my number 15 spot, I have Michigan. Now, I'm predicting Michigan to go 9-3 with a loss to Penn State, Ohio State, and Minnesota. Now, they could go 8-4, even 7-5 with a loss to Washington and Wisconsin. Best case scenario in my eyes for them would have to be a 10-2 season, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're more likely to go 9-3. Now, some notable players they have are Dax Hill, Ambry Thomas, and Aiden Hutchinson. This Michigan squad did lose their starting quarterback and some other key pieces, and it's just a bunch of unproven area right now. But they could be really good. They could be below average. They could be disappointing. Only time will tell. Coming in at number 16, I have the Texas Longhorns. Now, I'm predicting a 9-3 record for Texas this year and to be second place in the Big 12. But they could go 10-2. I don't see them going 11-1, but I definitely see 10-2. Now let's talk about some notable players. Sam Ehlinger, Tariq Black, and Keontae Ingram. Coming in at my number 17 spot, I have Texas A&M. Now, Texas A&M recently has been pretty disappointing, especially with Kellen Mond, who hasn't been playing terrible. It's just, never living up to the hype. Now, I do have a 7-5 record, but that doesn't mean they'll finish like that. I do have 7-5 predicted, but they could go 9-3. It's just, I had some upsets against them because I feel like Texas A&M always seems to disappoint people. Now, some notable players from Texas A&M are Kellen Mond, Keon Green, and Jaden Peavy. Now, this is a good squad. It's just, will we finally see it this year? Coming in at the number 18 spot, I have North Carolina. Even though North Carolina went 7-6 last year, they were very young, inexperienced, new head coach, and they showed a lot of flashes of potential to be a team that's on the rise in this upcoming season. Now, I'm expecting a lot from Sam Howell and this team. I do have an 11-1 record. I do have them losing to UCF. But if you saw my ACC prediction video, make sure you watch it. Because I say on the Auburn game, if they win, I'm 50-50 on it. In the UCF game, I'm 50-50 on it. Because I'm not going to sleep on UCF, especially at UCF. Now, worst case scenario is 8-4 with a loss to Miami, Pitt, Auburn, and UCF. But more than likely, I see a 10-2, 11-1 season and competing in the ACC championship game with Clemson. Now, some notable players are Sam Howell, Javonte Williams, and Daz Newsome. With my number 19 spot, I have Iowa State. Now, Iowa State really seems like they're on the rise yet again, especially with Brock Purdy as quarterback. That's only getting better and seen as a top 10 quarterback right now. Now, I do have an 8-4 record, but they could definitely be a 9-3 team, but I don't see them being a 10-win team. 9-3 at best, but I have 8-4 right now. They could even be 7-5, but I highly doubt it. That's like worst case scenario. But let's talk about some notable players for Iowa State, such as Brock Purdy, Breece Hall, and Charlie Kohler. With my number 20 spot, I have USC. Now, I have USC going 9-3 on the season with a loss to Notre Dame, Oregon, and Alabama. But they could also go 8-4 with the loss to Arizona State. Now, this USC team is a team that's competing for the Pac-12 championship game and to be in it from their side, which is very tough, especially with Arizona State on the rise as well. Now, let's talk about some notable players for USC. Now, some notable players for USC are Kendon Slovis, Brew McCoy, and Elijah Griffin. Coming in at the number 21 spot, you have the Arizona State Sun Devils. Now, I'm predicting Arizona State to go 10-2 this season with a loss to Oregon and USC. But they could go 12-0 easily if they can beat Oregon and USC. But worst case scenario is 9-3 if they lose to Utah, Oregon, and USC. Now, this is a team that's on the rise, especially under Coach Herm Edwards and starting quarterback Jaden Daniels. Some notable players, Jaden Daniels, Jermaine Lowell, and Frank Darby. Coming in at the number 22 spot, I have UCF. Now, I'm predicting them to go 12-0 this season. As the best case scenario, they could definitely do it. They're still a very talented squad and very well coached. Now, worst case scenario is 9-3 with a loss to Cincinnati, Memphis, and North Carolina. Those are all likely. Now, 12-0 may not be as likely. Like I said, 50-50 on North Carolina right now. They could lose to them and be 11-1 and even be 10-2 on the season. But some notable players for UCF are Dylan Gabriel, Trey Nixon, and Eric Mitchell. Coming in at number 23, I have the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, I have them finishing 9-3 this year with a loss to Minnesota, Ohio State, and Penn State. But worst case scenario to me is 8-4 with a loss to Wisconsin, and maybe even 7-5 with a loss to Iowa State, but I don't see that happening for Iowa. Now, best case scenario would be 10-2 if they could beat Minnesota. And now let's talk about the notable players for Iowa. Notable players are Brandon Smith, Sam Laporta, and Tyler Lindenbaugh. This is a very talented squad, mainly on the offensive line and the defensive side, but they do have some quarterback questions to answer as they did lose their best quarterback to the draft that was drafted by the Minnesota Vikings. Coming in at number 24, I have Utah. Now, I'm predicting a 10-2 record for Utah with a loss to USC and Arizona State. Now, unfortunately, I see that as the worst case scenario for Utah, even though they lost a lot. Their side of the Pac-12 is a little easier. Best case scenario, 11-1, even though they still lost a lot of pieces. Now let's talk about some notable players such as Clark Phillips III, Max Tupai, and Jake Bentley, the transfer from South Carolina. Finishing off the top 25, I have Memphis. Now, Memphis, I'm projecting an 11-1 record with a loss to UCF. Best case scenario, undefeated. Worst case scenario, 9-3 with a loss to Cincinnati, UCF, and SMU. This is a team that's been pretty consistent, and they're pretty well coached. Some notable players are Brady White, Kenny Gainwell, and DeMonte Coxey. Now, my first 5 out are Boise State, SMU, Cincinnati, TCU, and Miami. Boise State is a program that has a easier schedule. They run the Mountain West, and they have a nice young quarterback on the rise. SMU, they have Shane Buechele. They could easily win the AAC, and they are contenders in their conference this year, especially under Shane Buechele, and they made a lot of noise last season as a surprise team in 2019. Cincinnati lost in the AAC championship game and look to compete in it yet again. And TCU, who seemed like a middle-pack team for the Big 12 this year, got the number 2 running back in the nation, 5-star running back Zach Evans, and now seem like they could contend to get into the Big 12 championship game this season or in the future. And then you have Miami, who has De'Aaron King, who had a phenomenal season just a couple years ago at Houston. Unfortunately got hurt last year and transferred out, but maybe he can change the Miami program and change the culture, something that Jaron Williams could not do because he was too immature. Well, guys, if you guys liked the video, remember to smash that like button, turn on the post notifications, and subscribe for more videos. B. Kelly out.